Okay, thank you everybody joining us today. What an exciting kickoff we've had this morning. I'm actually talking to you from downtown Houston. So just 6 blocks away is the newly constructed Ion. Houston's been the center of the energy industry in the last decade, tremendous innovation in the healthcare space. And an area that perhaps we still have work to do is in the tech and innovation sector. And super excited about Houston Exponential, Houston Ventures, the Rise Alliance, all the folks that have contributed. I am very excited and privileged to host this group. There was a little pattern recognition that I was doing, so I'll just start with that. 3 of our 4 colleagues here today went to Harvard. We have a double mechanical engineering graduate, and then you have me, who just barely got a bachelor's degree. So I don't know how I drew the long straw to host this esteemed panel, but what we want to talk about today is scale and get a variety of perspectives. We have one founder, and Sashi, you're first in my Zoom window, so we'll start with you. But and we'll go around the Zoom block here and get some perspectives. But we'll start with you, Sashi. You are a lot envious position of being the only Houston unicorn, I think, one of 25 Indian American owned and started companies. A lot of people listening in today are probably thinking, boy, how did he do it? But I'll start with something that I'm going to ask each of our panelists today. Tell me a little bit about, before we jump into scale and all the exciting things we'll talk about, tell the audience a little bit about sort of why you decided to become an entrepreneur. And, you know, after 16, 17 years of bootstrapping, and now you've had success, what is it that has stayed consistent in this journey for you?
Yeah, sure. So I actually became an entrepreneur accidentally in my previous company, a couple of years out of college. I was working at HP and Compaq when they were merging as part of the e-commerce group. So, and then we had built some IP, and then became literally an accidental entrepreneur. I was a nerdy developer. I'm still nerdy. And then one led to the other. So for me, that journey of the 4 years of the previous company, I was with a company called Riversand. I learned a lot about sales, marketing, and other functions. And then I took a year off to figure out what do I want to do next. And that journey helped me kind of solidify my decision that I want to be an entrepreneur for the long run, but I still needed to take some time off to think about it. And then I started High Radius. So I've been doing this for the last 14 years.
That's great. Ben, you are next on my screen likely because from what you told me, you courted Sashi quite a bit to try to get him to take your money. But you also have that kind of same look going, certainly, in terms of, so from a VC standpoint, we spent some time talking about your background. I mean, you went to Yale, Harvard Business School. You've been in this space for a long time. Tell me a little bit about your personal North Star and sort of the philosophy of your growth fund and how you go about doing things in the medium to long-term horizon.
Great. So thanks for having us here and hosting this panel. We are a little different than the traditional growth equity firm at Susquehanna Growth Equity, and the difference arises really from our source of capital. All of our capital comes from the founders of a very large company called the Susquehanna International Group, SIG, which is the largest equity options market making business in the world. It's a business that was bootstrapped by 3 guys who went to college together, went to SUNY Binghamton, and they grew it into a very, very large company. They started in 1987 in the very early days of the equity options business, and they've grown with that whole industry. They formed our group with the view that technology can transform industries, and as individuals, they have the ability to support a company for a very long period of time. So from that kind of principle and from that source of capital comes what we look for, which is companies that are participating in the disruption of an industry. that can take place over a long period of time in participating in some kind of meaningful long-term penetration technology in an industry. And we saw that in high radius, which was the automation of the financial services industry, which is a broader theme that we've participated in a number of different areas. And with high radius in particular, it was what was happening in accounts receivable and the accounts receivable automation and kind of the office of the CFO. Those companies are often very difficult to get a hold of, which is why we were kind of courting Sashi for as long as we were. But we kind of saw and continue to see a very long-term trend, and it was a very, very nice fit for us as a firm.
That's great. Thank you. We'll have a few more questions for you and Sashi. Dana, I have to say, as I was doing my research about your background, I was just blown away. I mean, what you've done in this space as a, Steve K said today in the kickoff, there are not many female VCs. The philosophy around Greylock, and from what I understand, is certainly limited. I like this notion of you went back to the old model. I was very intrigued by that. It tells me a lot about the philosophy of more about what the entrepreneur and the company needs versus what the fund and the cash to be given. So with that as a backdrop, would you tell us a little bit about your philosophy as a founding member of your venture fund, and sort of how you think about your North Star and the philosophy of investing?
Yeah, sure. First of all, just to clarify, we're Greycroft, not Greylock.
Yes,
but it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And at least it's, not a bad firm to be confused with. So I'm not going to. But yeah, I mean, I think like any founder, when we started Greycroft, we really saw kind of a hole in the market, or just, a way of doing things differently. And as we saw it sort of better. I had spent 10 years in Silicon Valley before moving to Los Angeles, which is where I've been now for the last 15 years. And really just saw, similar to what Steve Case has been doing, but the opportunity for entrepreneurship, being much broader than just Silicon Valley. And obviously that has come to fruition over the last 15 years in a very significant way. And in the past year, accelerated even further. But our North Star really will always be to support entrepreneurs in the way that they need to be supported. And really what that means is not thinking about, the venture business in any sort of a cookie cutter model. And so, really looking at each company individually, looking at what that company needs, looking at what, the founder and management team may need to have in terms of being complemented on the team or the board or investor group, and taking that approach when we invest. So when we invest in a company, whether it's at the seed stage or at the growth stage, because we invest sort of full life cycle, we have two different vehicles. We're always thinking about, in this case, we generally like to lead deals, but we're also very happy to follow if that's what makes sense in a given scenario. We just want to be involved with the best companies and greatest founders that are building really industry and category defining companies globally. So just one more point on that too is just, so we syndicate 100% of the time. We don't believe that we're the only group that should come into any given situation. We always want to bring other people around the table. And we really believe in building public company boards, standard, great corporate governance and diverse boards from day one.
Well, I will say, my 13-year-old said, Dad, when you get your fangirl moment, so I think the arc of Greycroft to Greylock and past is going to happen to you. That's just my prediction. Hey, John Sieber, first of all, thank you for your service. You served in the U.S. Air Force. You spent a lot of time in that space. Tell us a little bit about UpData. I mean, you've got a remarkable background, 2 patents. You've done software development at scale. You've got product development at IBM. I mean, what an incredible background. Tell us a little bit about what is your passion for innovators, entrepreneurship, and how you think about personally about investment, your thesis, and then of course about your firm.
Sure, and thanks for asking me to join the panel today. It's a pleasure to be here. Houston's a great place for innovation, and we're very happy to be supporting the ecosystem and having been part of its success in the past. Updata is a firm that was founded by three gentlemen who were software entrepreneurs in the early days of the industry. They started companies and scaled companies and took them public, and then later sold them in M&A. And that operational ethos and DNA is what really drives the business today. Everyone on the senior team remains an operator, and we focus on, as Dana said, figuring out what individual companies need to help them scale. And the stage at which we invest, the growth stage, really is about helping companies scale. Different companies, they all need to do the same things, but they need to do them in different ways to make them successful. And we try to tailor the help we give to the individual companies, and informed by the fact that we have all worked in, run, managed software companies of all shapes and sizes. I did start my career as a developer, got to work in the technology industry in a bunch of different contexts, and managed people in both the military and in business. And I think what I've learned along the way is that, and this really informs how we try to back businesses, find the best teams, give them the tools that they need to be successful, be there to provide valued insights and whatever tools they need along the way, and let them do what they do, which is grow businesses.
I really like what you said. Just a few words about the company I work in. We're a chemicals, plastics, and refining company. We're global, and I think this notion of creating an environment where people can innovate, drive things, really helps us. So scale is different for everybody, right? Scale for us are world-size crackers that, run process manufacturing, make products that. Plastics have changed modern life, but I also think this notion of sustainability, digital, we're grappling with what do these macro themes do for our industry, right? Should a plastics and chemical company play a leading role in elimination of plastic waste, for example? So maybe go back to Sashi, as you think about the previous 16 years, but you look ahead, I was just surprised, you would have thought that collecting cash and receivables, somebody would have solved this problem, since cash is king. This past year has shown us that. What are you thinking about as kind of that macro trend or two that's inspiring you to innovate differentially as you think about super scaling high radius?
Yeah, so I think the high level answer is, I believe that with time, everybody will invent a better way. We use a term called as is and to be. So there is an as-is state, and in the as-is state, when you're living in the moment, you think that's the best state. But then a decade from now, somebody will disrupt the as-is state to a better to be. And I do believe that the consumers at large will take a better to be process. If you take Uber as an example versus Yellow Cab, once you get used to Uber, you're never going to go back, right? So that's kind of for simple pieces. So the way we always think about our own business is every space is theoretically you can disrupt, including Salesforce as an example. But then the question is, what are your arts and do you want to be in that? So when we think about what we do compared to the as-is state, we brought a lot of disruption in terms of improving day sales outstanding, automation levels, and so forth. But I'm sure there is somebody else who will figure it out in a much better way. Our goal is to stay ahead. So we think about how can we bring the shifts now as a continuous manner so that we are always ahead of the game, versus if not, somebody else will do it. So that's kind of my short answer. I think the whole concept of digital transformation and so forth, it's good. There is a lot of hype associated with it, but I think at the end of the day, a specific company, whether you're an automobile manufacturer or a software company, is fundamentally changing the way the problem is solved so that the end user's experience is significantly better, that they will never go back to the older way.
I really love that. Kind of solve for the horizon today, but keep an eye on the future. Dana, any thoughts to add? I saw you agreeing on my panel here on Zoom. I'm also very intrigued about kind of almost the humility to not always be the leader, right? And jump ahead. But that was my sense. But anything else you would add about kind of this notion of longer term thinking, but balancing short term return?
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of just nodding. I mean, I think just like that, you know, for me, I do a lot of consumer investing. As a firm, we do both. But I mean, I think where either side, just keeping the end user at the center of your focus, you know, is so critical. And I think about that for our companies, and I think about that for ourselves, you know, as a fund, because the venture industry is evolving incredibly, you know, rapidly right now, and really has over the last 5 years. And so, you know, I think if you keep, you know, if you sort of keep the end user customer as sort of the North Star, then, and keep evolving, you know, you can't stay in the as is state, as Sashi said. You know, you have to sort of be continuing to evolve, because things are just moving forward, and moving forward faster now than ever.
Ben, I'll pull you into this one. I was really, this struck me as I was reading your bio. I'll read it. Use of technology in slower adopting and highly fragmented industries. So I've spent a lot of time in my career in fossil fuel, energy. I have to say, when the oil and gas industry is billed as slower than governments, that gives you reason to pause, right? So when you're being boiled as a frog in this sector, things seem radical. But I really love what you said, Dana, about there's a lot of learnings from the retail consumer world that need to be adopted here. So Ben, maybe from your perspective, Houston has a lot of traditional legacy types of companies and perhaps mindset. What's your view, and you know, what advice would you give us to the corporate folks on crushing innovation and not being able to help scale it? So maybe we'll take the conversation in that direction.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of different kind of pieces of what you said to build on. I spend a lot of time thinking about how technology is going to impact the people who are most, or the organizations that are the most capital and resource starved, right? Think of small businesses, thinly capitalized businesses. And, you know, it's easy for, you know, Wells Fargo to think about their technology initiatives. It's very different for a machine shop or a metal fabricator to think about their technology initiatives. I think what's happened over the past 10 years is, you know, technology has really become kind of went from being something targeted to the Fortune 1000 to being something that's been meaningfully democratized and consumable in much more bite-sized widgets. And so the automation and productivity benefits that come from the use of technology, frankly, it's almost entirely driven by the iPhone. But I think about the business ecosystem in Houston, which is very engineering driven. There's a tremendous amount of kind of the scientific and kind of quantitative knowledge and orientation and mindset. I think the raw materials from a human capital perspective are very, very well in place. I think what Houston doesn't have, as it relates to, you know, this bizarre technology bubble, you know, bubble that we're in right now, is experience with kind of a large number of kind of SaaS and technology businesses. So I think, to your point, it really is kind of probably more of a question of mindset and kind of application of, you know, some of the lessons learned of kind of building and scaling technology businesses to this really tremendous kind of human capital asset, I think is in the city. And you know, I don't think it's that far a leap. I spend most of my time as an investor in places like Houston, Minneapolis, and Atlanta, and other really strong kind of diversified cities with diversified economies. And I think that you know, as to how to bring it all together, there's a real kind of economic development question around that, and how to create communities around it. But I'm very encouraged by the opportunities presented by, you know, it's really kind of about the entrepreneurs who are able to galvanize those communities of people and kind of facilitate some of that, you know, very mild reskilling from more traditional industries, and figuring out how to bring innovation into those industries and take that tremendous domain knowledge that's already there today. That's where I spend all of my time as an investor, and I'm encouraged by I think that represents a huge opportunity for cities like Houston, and I think it's a very promising future for technology in cities like this.
I really like that word galvanize. You said it, there's no shortage of problems we try to solve, right? Here in this area, but this notion of an ecosystem, how do we learn? The word that came to mind is a playbook almost. And John, I'll maybe turn to you. We heard this morning the first spaceport is going to possibly be built next to the Johnson Space Center. There's tremendous innovation. Moonshot, the journey to the moon started here in Houston at Rice. Tell us a little bit about why have you fallen in love with this notion of innovation, and I hope you fall in love with the city of Houston. What is it that is attractive to you, and what would you tell the entrepreneurs and investors listening today about how you think about the playbook, if there's such a thing?
Yeah, look, I think the challenging thing about the playbook for innovation is that it's at once simple and massively complicated, right? And Sashi said it very well. The secret to all of it is finding a job that needs to get done and figuring out how to do it better, right? And not thinking about, I think there's a temptation, especially in the software world, to try to come up with a science project and then find a problem to fit the science project into. And the most successful companies that we've backed, the ones that I find the most interesting, are ones that tackle a practical issue and then utilize the experience of the entrepreneur to solve the problem. And I'll give a plug to the team the founding team at AlertLogic that we backed there in Houston, because it was a very successful business, remains a very successful business. And they took a technology that in the network security space that was in the beginning only applicable to very large enterprises that had large security teams and were willing to spend a lot of money. They knew that problem was applicable to every business that had a network on the planet, and figured out a way to distill the most useful pieces of the software down to a consumable cloud solution. And then realized that the last mile, that part that was delivered by security teams at large enterprises, could be done in an automated fashion within AlertLogic and then outsourced. And did they reinvent the security wheel? Not from a technological standpoint, but from a solution standpoint. And I think that needs to be the playbook more so than let's take a lot of money and try to figure out how to advance advanced science for the sake of science. Of course, that should go on, but innovation to me is as much about the last mile as it is about the beginning of the scientific journey. So, when we think about which companies to fund and which entrepreneurs to back, it's the ones that have a direct connection to industries, to various constituencies, and think about how to solve individual problems in a very capital efficient way. And obviously, in places like Houston, that typically fits into the context of the industries that are resident in those cities. And so, we keep a lookout for things that play in the right context. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I really like this this emphasis on capital efficiency. I have to tell you, we certainly deal in hundreds of millions, maybe billions in our industry, in our company, but the focus on return and how you spend every dollar is still there. So I think regardless of scale, success around capital efficiency, having this strong kind of ROI mindset, I really like that. I'll encourage those who are on to ask questions. You all are popular, so we've started to see some questions in the feed here. I'll go to those for a little bit and come back to my kind of set of questions. Sashi, this one is for you. How did you navigate the funding during early stage, pre-seed, seed of high radius?
Okay. Yeah, so ours is probably a bit of an exception. So I'll explain what we did. We actually did not focus on funding the pre-seed and seed stage at all. So I'm going to give my answer, but I also want to caution that it may or may not apply to everyone. So our goal when we started the business has been the same, which is building a long-lasting business that outlasts us. That's kind of my vision statement. And I think that's something I shared with Ben and Amir and from Suskan and all the investors as well. So the idea was to bootstrap the business long enough so that you add a lot of life to the company, because my analysis was if you raise too much money too early and do the usual ABCD round of funding, then it's fair game. You got to give exit to the investors, and that felt like the lifespan of the company would be reduced a lot. So we stretched it as long as we can. It was actually very tempting, and multiple times as a combination of acquisition offers or investment offers. But I think at the right time, when we reached that scale and we really believed that we could fuel the growth by more money, we raised funding.
Ben, anything else you want to add from a VC standpoint? How was that experience, having to court and push him? I guess it sounds like.
Well, I think it's really. I think when entrepreneurs build businesses that are capital efficient and kind of in growth areas, there's no real pushing. It's a matter of making sure that the time is there. You know, you can make your point as to what the benefits of bringing capital on. But ultimately, I think when you've built a capital efficient business in an industry that has promise, you really hold a lot of cards. And I think that's the best place, I think, for an entrepreneur to hold any business, really. And so I think kind of thinking about, you know, there's an appropriate funding model for all different kinds of businesses. And I think that that's something that I think Sashi was especially deliberate about in the early days at High Radius.
I really like that. I think the sense I'm getting is this is a kind of coordinated collaborative approach, which is really focused on a kind of common set of interests of growing for the long term. Dana, I'll come back to you. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about the diversity of Houston, right? We're most diverse city in the United States today. We have a lot of challenges, but a tremendous number of Hispanics, African Americans, women are entering the workforce. We have a great pipeline. When you think about these, but the statistics are kind of jarring, right? Let me just read here. 50% of the population is women in the U.S. and mostly around the world, maybe a few countries. Less than 10% of funding from VCs goes to women. 13% of the population in the United States is Black, and only 1% of funding. I'll add on a few other things, right? I happen to serve on the March of Dimes board here. The preterm birth rate and maternal death rate in Houston got an F, right? It's one of the worst in probably the industrial world. So it's a bit of a paradox. Tell me a little bit about the focus on inclusion and equity, and then what that does to diversity from your perspective.
So, you know, as a woman who, you know, co-founded a venture fund, it's diversity and funding female founders is something that is very, you know, near and dear to my heart, and I think is critical for the country and for the world. And you know, I think this is not something new that I'm about to say, but it's just true. It's the more that we see people that look like ourselves doing things, the more that we feel like that's something that's possible to do. And so, you know, I have personally really focused on funding, you know, not exclusively, but diverse teams and female founders, and in doing that, really pushing them and encouraging them and supporting them to really take their businesses all the way too, and do what Sashi's doing, which is build a truly lasting business, build something that is very significant and very large. If you look at the data, you know, female founders do tend to have more diverse teams in general, executive teams and the sort of across the entire organizations. And so that, you know, again, it sort of has the effect of trickling down and sort of inspiring more leaders. We are very fortunate to be investors actually in a company based in Texas, Bumble, which has filed to go public and is female founded and is a really incredible story. And another company of ours that went public a couple of years ago, The Real, which was founded by a female founder, Julie Wainwright. But, you know, look, I mean, I think it doesn't happen without effort. And I think really constantly just looking at the pipeline of deals that you have and looking at the, founding teams and looking at your own teams, looking at your executive team, looking at your board and just saying, is this representative of this? Is this indicative and representative of the, of our, of the community and of the broader, just of the world that we live in? And so to me, it takes effort, but it's really just about observing what you currently have and then looking at how you can make change.
Thank you for that. Hey, I'll just follow up with a question in the chat here from Sandy. Tell us about the B2C world. How important is building your company in a diverse city for a diverse customer base? We are seeing more of B2C in Houston, and our diversity seems to be related to this trend. Have you seen this in other ecosystems?
Well, I'll touch on it quickly and then let somebody else talk. So I'm not, but just in the, B2C, definitely. I mean, the teams that are starting these companies need to really understand at a very deep level the customers that they're serving. And I think the modern consumer absolutely is looking all the way through to what the product is, how it's manufactured, what the supply chain is, who the team is that's behind it. It's no longer acceptable to just sort of buy any product off the shelf and not think what's happened, through that product's journey. So I think that is going to drive a lot of really, exciting sort of entrepreneurial companies that will be started by more diverse teams.
I'll just double down on this notion of circularity, right? The consumer is very powerful in that sense, and large companies that primarily have dealt in a B2B world are really getting disrupted because of that notion of people really care, right? To green power, sustainability. Hey, John, let me come to you. Go ahead, please. Yes.
No, I said GameStop.
Yes, that definitely. That certainly has taken over the airwaves for the last week. It was frankly refreshing to hear something other than politics, but nonetheless. Hey, John, I'll come to you. SolarWinds sort of shook us in a radical way. I think there's always been nation state actors, cybersecurity risk. We gave an update to our board recently, and it's sort of changed the game, right? The supply chain risk, and it's gone to a different level. Give us your perspective on cybersecurity. What trends are you seeing? Is this a seminal moment, or will it be more of the same? And any entrepreneurs in the Houston area thinking about that as a space to innovate?
So security's been a part of my career from the start, and it remains a big investment focus for UpData. We've got multiple security investments in the portfolio at this point. Yes, I mean, unequivocally, it is a seminal moment. It's always been on the minds of responsible corporations and responsible nation states, but I think everyone realizes now what's at stake if we don't treat it with the appropriate level of seriousness and care, from infrastructure to data, and what can't be lost in there is privacy of the individual as well. And so I think what this moment means, and SolarWinds really indicates, is that the level of care that's taken to integrate it into everything as it's built is going to take a big step forward. I think the level of investment made in training the average individual or employee at individual companies is going to take a big step forward. And I think certainly that spells great opportunity for entrepreneurs and for investors. Enormous fortunes have been made in security, over the course of the entire life cycle of the software industry. But just as Mark Andreessen said, software is eating the world. I think security is going to have to eat software and everything else going forward. And so encourage anyone who is considering making a bet in that space to charge ahead. We need it in all aspects of industry and society.
Okay, so we've got about 7 minutes left. We're going to go into rapid fire mode. I will start directing questions to two of you. So we'll start with Ben and Sashi. Here's a question for you. What do you see as the greatest external communication challenges of companies moving into the growth stage?
Go ahead, Ben. You want to take that?
Wow, tough one. I would
better answer.
Yeah, communication challenges. I think it's all about kind of engaging with your customers. I think a bit of what Dana said earlier, engaging with your customers and your employees. You know, how do you stay on top of them and make sure that you're meeting needs and you're kind of maintaining product market fit and keeping your product moving in the right direction.
Sashi, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. When I think about external communication, we always like to focus exactly on the personas we are going after. So for us, it is the customers and the prospective customers, so the target market we are going after. And the number two is what we call as the new high radians, the new employees. So we look at this as two different channels altogether. For the external, the target market, the biggest challenge is how do you elevate your category to be big enough? Because as you grow bigger, you need to get a lot of net new bookings. And then the traditional sales marketing techniques don't scale up anymore if you need to grow 50%. So you need to kind of almost become how do you become the de facto need of the space that you are in for an exec? So how do you continue to message to them, and we cannot call it like brainwash the target market to think about solving your problem in that year, even though the market is very large. In terms of the other track of employees is very focused for us in the region. So if you're in Houston, how do we message to the Houstonians? To if you're in India or Germany, so it's very localized based on each location. And then the challenge is the supply demand gap. So we like Houston because we are not competing with a lot of tech companies to recruit, so we don't see that much of a challenge. But let's say if you're in Hyderabad, it's a very hot market and a lot of competitive companies and other SaaS companies, so that's a bit harder. So we need to be more creative in messaging there.
That's great insights. Hey, I'll use the final question in the chat here from Jorge Frausto around exponential growth and success, and tie it back to what we started with, which is this notion of scale. So when you think about scale, we'll start with John, go to Dana, Sashi, and then Ben. What does scale mean to you, and what would be the playbook for achieving faster scale than perhaps other markets you've seen for the Houston market?
Scale to me is the ability to grow the business while maintaining the same level of quality and service delivery that you have with one customer out through end customers. And that always comes down to team, executive team, employees at every level of the company, aligned on the mission. Really focused on what it takes to make the end customer happy, whether it's B2B or B2C. And if you have that, if you have the right leadership and the right processes and the right focus on what it is you're trying to do every day, the rest of it, I don't want to minimize this, but the rest of it falls into place.
Great. Dana?
Yeah, I mean, having the right team, and just really focusing from day one, and and every day forward on making sure that you have the right team, and that the team is motivated, and that you understand their motivations, and that they're aligned on and sort of behind the mission, and then that the mission is clear to your whole team, and just keeping that focus. And then using your board, frankly, to keep your eye on things that might be coming from left field. I mean, that I think that is, if you can have all of that alignment, you'll be in great shape to scale.
Sashi, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so for me, scale is actually market penetration. So I'll make it very specific to the market, the enterprise SaaS market that we are in, which is mostly going after the big name logos. So there are about 3,000 of them. So to me, scale is reaching 100 customers, roughly about 3% of the market. And let's say if you are able to charge 100,000 per annual subscription, so that's about 10 million ARR. I think the game just changes, and the way you have to think about growing the business further is very different from going to, let's say, 0 to 10.
Ben, what about you? You may be muted. I was waiting to use that line, so thank you for doing that for me.
Bummer, it's me. For me, it's a question of balance. I think it's a question of breadth and narrowness, right? I think one of the opportunity of scale is to communicate with as broad a mouthpiece as you can. But I think as a manager, you really need to stay narrowly focused on serving those customers as well as possible. So I think you want to be in a market that can go broad, but really kind of focus on winning over your most rabid and your most supportive customers, and continue to expand and build off of that base. So, and over time, as that base does grow, I think continuing to adjust the funnel out, but doing so with a priority, a focus on keeping the range as narrow as possible, and making those bets to broaden out as prudently as you can.
Look, this has been fantastic. I've learned a lot. I hope it was beneficial for others. We'll close out with one kind of personal question. Each of you, very quickly, what is the one skill you have picked up during this pandemic? Let's start with Sashi. Cannot be related to growing your company. That's the only disclaimer. Go for it, quickly.
I'm going to just say, Reese picked up. I started playing golf after a decade, which I gave up and retired.
You and I are going to play in Houston. Ben, what have you done?
Gardening.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. Dana, what about you?
Fundraising over Zoom.
Oh, awesome. John.
I've gotten really good at pitching batting practice to my kids.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, look, I've rediscovered, of course, that I know how to cook a little bit. So, and sharing that passion with my family, and not seeing the inside of a plane has been helpful for me. So, hey, look, I'll just say a big thank you to Houston Exponential Ventures. What a great forum today. Thank you to my colleagues on this panel, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for having us.
Well.
Well, thanks very much. Fantastic panel. We really appreciate that. I'm Harvin Moore, the head of Houston Exponential, and amazing to start today with Steve Case. It was a really good first day so far of Venture Houston 2021. Remember, it's a 2-day conference, and we have a lot more still to come. In fact, the next item is the pitch competition. As you know, the purpose of Venture Houston is to connect, local entrepreneurs with venture capital, to help them see more venture capital, and to help venture capital see them from wherever the capital may be, and to learn from venture capital. It's to make Houston's growth stage companies more transparent and visible. As you've heard today, Houston really is at an inflection point. This is something that's going on in many places around the country and around the world, but it's a big thing in Houston, and it's really happening. As you also heard, there is a very important database that founding startup companies should be listed on. There's over 500 companies that have joined the new HTX Tech List, which is a free service that's provided by Houston Exponential at htxtechlist.com. It is available as a tool for both for external talent, but also external capital. Venture capitalists, for example, in order to be able to easily navigate using an amazing number of tags, all the deals here in Houston. So if you, as a founder, your company is not yet on HTX Tech List, please get yourself listed. Like I say, it's free. And also, if you are an investor, please be sure to go there and utilize that free service in order to learn more about the ecosystem here. As I mentioned, next up is the pitch competition that will be going on at 1:40 p.m., so very soon. As you all have heard, there are 30 semi-finalist companies that are a part of the pitch competition. They've been divided into 3 different tracks. These will be judged by panels of external judges and venture capitalists, and there is over $1.7 million in investment prizes. So it is a very large and exciting pitch competition and a great opportunity. In the meantime, you can network with the other amazing people that are here at this conference, and you can do that. If you will look on your screen, on the left side of the screen, you will see that something called Expo and also something called Sessions. Don't use the networking tab actually, but you do, in order to network, go to the Expo area, or like I say, the Sessions area, and you will be prompted there in those areas to return to the stage at 1:40, where you will get the introduction of the pitch competition and then the pitch competition. And remember also, again, this is a 2-day conference. There's a lot of great stuff tomorrow all day, including the final round of the pitch competition. So stay tuned, and we are very, very glad to have you here at Venture Houston 2021.